So John, you mentioned in the previous interview we did that in The Genius of Money, the book's been introduced as a textbook in MBA programs because there's nobody else that's really approaching the question of what is money from that same perspective. Could you go a little bit deeper into what that means or what that looks like? Why would in MBA students or their professors be looking for something different, and what is it that they only find in your book?
Sure. Well, I don't know if they only find it in my book, but it really is a focused exploration of money in relation to the sort of the depth of the quality of transactions. So an entrepreneur is going to go out and they're probably going to have to borrow money, they're probably going to have to purchase things. Entrepreneurs don't usually get gifts, although the kind of venture capital or early venture capital that from friends and family that are investing in them is potentially a gift, because there's no guarantee that that's going to come back to them. I think everybody's very hopeful about that, but understanding not that money's a singular thing, but in fact when you borrow money there's a sense of mutuality and mutual trust and mutual interest in each other, and in fact you're kind of locked in a relationship and dependent on each other's success is very different than getting money that you're just going to purchase things with, because that happens very quickly and very fast, and it's an exchange of values and it's over with and done. People who are taking a longer term investment or are not taking interest on loans or are even gifting the money and not with any particular strings attached, there's a whole other order of I would say connection that comes through that, what allows that kind of transaction to happen. And if the social entrepreneur is a not-for-profit entity, for example, that really can come as a tax-deductible gift, but does that come with strings attached? Are there intentions in that? How does one unearth those intentions? And can one see that actually the money is following a certain flow of relationship and destiny in a way? And again, that's a kind of language and a way of framing that relationship that is really... So there's the nature of the transaction itself, which is kind of accountants look at the transaction, but then there is the relationship aspect, transactional relationship, if I can call it, that has almost a meta quality to it that is really important because people's intentions flow with their money.
Yeah, so people in the, for example, independent school movement, and to include the independent Waldorf schools, do rely quite a lot on gift money both for capital purposes and also for operations. Standard schools fundraise just annually as a regular part of operations. And they're obviously not the only not-for-profit in town that's looking for contributions. So how does that, for those who have the capacity to be a donor, how does the relationship piece of that work?
Well, I think, you mentioned the word relationship, and I think that is absolutely the key to all of it. But then relationship for what purpose, toward what end? What is the actual nature of the relationship? Because oftentimes folks who are doing development work are out there and they feel like they're hunters, gatherers, whatever. That, your job is to go get. And my experience is that people who do have the capacity to give have certain sensors, natural antennae that know when they're being, quote, targeted or hunted or gathered from. And really, if you are interested in serious development work, then you really need to be interested in the other human being. And it's out of a shared relationship that comes a sense of what each other's longing for. So there really is very rarely a major gift that doesn't move to an organization because somehow that organization was fulfilling something of the donor's heart's desire to see done in a world that they may not have been able to get done themselves. So there's a kind of completion that happens there, but that doesn't happen because you think it should happen. It happens because of the deeper understanding that is developed and the kind of trust that is developed in there, and in the sense for who somebody is that is the donor, not just what they have and what they want to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. it does seem in our society with fortunes, whether they be in tech or in other areas, made suddenly and in some cases somewhat unexpectedly, people then feel like they want to make a difference, they want to change the world, and it's funny to think from the other side how sometimes difficult it is to actually make the world change just because you got a bunch of money. So,
well, I mean, the reality is that you can't make someone or something do something that is not in their nature to really want to do. Forcing your will, so to speak, onto another human being or onto an organization is usually pretty unsustainable and fairly counterproductive. So it isn't really about the money. The money itself, of course, is a kind of language. It is a capacity. It enables an organization to actually do something if it's monetarily related. But it's really about what you are accomplishing together in partnership. Because often the organization is able to do something that the donor's not able to do, and the donor has the resources but can't do what the organization can do. So there really is a mutual benefit to both of them long term. So
you get a kind of out of balance if the organization's just, give me money, we need money. Why? Well, don't ask questions, just write checks. And then the flip side is if donors like, well, Haiti's a mess, I want to fix Haiti, here's $1 billion, make Haiti better. And in both cases, you don't actually get any progress.
Well, you don't, because at the end of the day, you can't make people of the country do something that is not sort of in their desire to get done. So you actually have a third party in there that you didn't name, which is the actual people who are on the ground already busy trying to solve some of the issues that they are. And in some ways, money may be actually a counterproductive.
Too much money, yeah.
Well, even any money might be counterproductive. Instead of saying, well, gee, we have a donor, what can that make possible? Maybe it isn't the money, maybe it's some other support structure, maybe it's physical space, maybe it is tools, maybe you don't really know. And the key is not to make assumptions about what's really needed, but to actually sit with the folks who are in need and say, what do you really need? What would help? And if it's more people, then don't give the money. Find the folks, or maybe the money makes the human resources available. So
well, and then you get to these larger metaphysical questions. Haiti is not Haiti by accident. There's hundreds of years of history from which some people have benefited tremendously, and other people are living in Haiti, and that's not necessarily fixed with over a couple of years, even with very large donations.
Sure. Well, I mean, that speaks to a level of I would say, even some of the origins of philanthropy in the first place, which, historically, I would say, has been fairly extractive out of the capital system. It's generated lots of wealth for very few people, particularly in colonized. Well, and actually, I wouldn't attest that just to Haiti, but historically, philanthropy came about because so many people had gathered wealth and collected it out of the capital system, in which the assumption was that it belonged to them as individuals and that they had earned it and accrued it. And we think of the great titans, the Andrew Carnegies, and the great industrialists of the 19th and early 20th century. And there was all this wealth, and somehow or other they felt, well, do you have all this wealth? Maybe I can give some of it back into the community. And that is a model of philanthropy which, in a sense, arises out of a certain injustice, in the sense that wealth was actually not created by them. It was actually created by an extraordinary number of people who worked hard and gave their lives and maybe didn't see the benefit of that in quite the same way.
Yeah.
So, because money and wealth is actually produced by a whole community. You can't produce wealth all by yourself. It just doesn't happen. It's a great myth.
How the system works.
No, the system doesn't work that way. The self-interest piece it's a great myth. So there's a certain sense of Carnegie wrote the Gospel of Wealth. And the notion was set that if you've accrued a lot of wealth, you have a responsibility to give it back to the community. And there's a certain capitalistic patriarchal view that's there.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole industry of philanthropy, in a sense, emerged out of that, when in fact, philanthropy is really about the circulation of gift and how gift can actually bring about economic life as a source of economic life. So really, if one looks at philanthropy as part of the economic process, which economists don't ever really think of it in that way.
It's part of the great cycle, though. The money has to circulate somehow.
Right, exactly. So it's gifted back and renews human capacity, and the culture then produces the wealth, and it goes back to produce new culture. There's a wonderful sort of call it relationship that is there. And so how do we integrate philanthropy into daily life? And I would say if people really stopped and asked themselves the question of what role has gift played in my life, probably the picture of the gift of education or the gift of love from their family. We all need this whole quality of gift, and it's actually been present. And somehow or other, that quality of caring and gifting has gotten attached to the money world and the capital world, and it's called philanthropy, or for some folks, charity. There's a whole question of like, why is it philanthropy for some and charity for others? Right?
Yeah, and why there are different like moral weightings to the two different types.
Right.
Yeah.
This goes back to the example that we spoke about earlier, where if you have wealth and an idea, if you don't bother to ask the folks who are actually doing the work on the ground what might be helpful or what might actually work and what do you really need, you can step into all sorts of power and assumptions and directions that aren't really grounded in what's truly needed, and therefore it's already inherently a broken system, and you can make all of the great strategic arguments for the value of it until you're blue in the face, but it won't land if it's not really wanted.
Well, so it sounds like the book is a very necessary and helpful view for people on the donor side, as well as for people on the trying to manifest intentions through nonprofits and other either charity or social benefit direction.
Yeah, I think that's true, although it isn't solely focused on philanthropy. There's quite a bit about the social enterprise world and our relationships around lending activity and investing activity as well, and generally how we are in economic life as well, but focus mostly on the money and the transactions that we take on the world. And then I would say also the culture of money, because there is a culture around money that it needs serious examination and reconsideration and unpacking, if I can call it that, and reconsideration. So it's really also looking deeply into the culture of money. And part of that is what led to the second book as well. And
we'll get to that one in a moment. Well, thank you, John.
Sure.